Welcome to MarkGuy, where we explore self-improvement, motivation, habits, mindset. In today's episode, we're discussing ignoring women, the secret to making her chase you. You know what no one tells you? The moment you stop chasing her is the moment she starts wondering where you went. It's not a game, it's psychology. And once you understand the wiring beneath the surface, you'll never look at attention the same way again. Picture this. You're texting her good morning every day, double tapping her photos within seconds, rearranging your schedule around her maybes. Meanwhile, she's taking 3 hours to reply with, haha, yeah. You feel it in your chest, that sinking realization that you're performing for an audience that isn't even watching. But here's where it gets darker. She was watching. She saw every desperate pixel of effort, and that's exactly why she looked away. Let me paint you a scene that's playing out in a million phones right now. A guy, let's call him you, from 6 months ago, is staring at red receipts like they're lottery numbers. His thumb hovers over the keyboard, crafting the perfect, casual, but interested response. Delete. Rewrite, delete. Send, instant regret. Check her Instagram story. She's out with friends, laughing at someone else's joke. That burn in your stomach? That's not jealousy. That's your reward system short-circuiting because you've turned yourself into a validation vending machine and she stopped inserting coins. This isn't about romance, it's about wiring. The human brain operates on what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the same principle that makes slot machines addictive. When rewards are unpredictable, we become obsessed. But here's the plot twist nobody mentions. When you're always available, always responding, always validating, you become the opposite of intermittent. You become background noise. Think about it. When was the last time you consciously noticed your breathing? You didn't until I just mentioned it. That's what constant availability does to attraction. You become autonomic, unconscious, taken for granted. She doesn't choose to ignore you. Her brain literally stops registering you as significant stimuli. You've trained her neural pathways to file you under resolved instead of intriguing. But here's where the real psychology kicks in and why ignoring works when nothing else does. When you suddenly withdraw attention from someone who's grown accustomed to it, you trigger what's called cognitive dissonance. Her brain, which had you categorized as always there, suddenly has to reconcile your absence. This creates psychological tension, and humans despise unresolved tension more than almost anything else. What does she do? She moves to resolve it. She texts first. She wonders what you're doing. She checks your stories. The absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. This is phase 1, the disruption. You stop initiating. You don't announce it. You don't make it dramatic. You simply redirect your energy. Response times stretch from instant to hours. Your world, which seemed to revolve around her axis, suddenly spins independently. And that's when something fascinating happens in her mind. You transform from a constant into a variable. Phase 2 is where most men fail because they don't understand the mechanics. See, when she reaches out, and she will, your instinct screams to flood her with all that pent-up attention. Don't. This is where intermittent reinforcement becomes your architecture. Sometimes you respond warmly, sometimes you're brief, sometimes you don't respond at all. You're not being cruel, you're being unpredictable. And unpredictability is the native language of attraction. Why does this work? Because scarcity creates value. It's not just economic theory, it's psychological law. When you were always available, your attention was worth nothing because supply was infinite. Now your attention has market value. She has to work for what was once free. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Humans only value what they work for. But let me tell you where this gets philosophically complex. You're not actually ignoring her to manipulate her. If that's your framework, you've already lost. True indifference, the kind that magnetically reverses pursuit, comes from genuine self-focus. You ignore her because you're building something more important. Yourself. The gym becomes your morning ritual. Books replace her texts as your evening company. Projects consume your weekends. You're not pretending to be busy. You're actually becoming someone worth pursuing. This is the paradox that breaks most men's brains. The best way to get her attention is to genuinely not need it. Think about the last time you saw someone completely absorbed in their craft. A musician lost in their instrument. An athlete in flow state. A writer deep in their work. There's something magnetically attractive about someone who doesn't need you to complete them. They're whole, self-contained. And that wholeness creates a gravitational pull that neediness never could. Here's where it hurts. Most of you reading this have never experienced being truly wanted because you've never given anyone the space to want you. You're so terrified of losing her that you suffocate the attraction before it can breathe. You water the plant so much that you drown it, then wonder why it won't grow. But here's where it gets even darker. She didn't fall for someone else because he was better than you. She fell for him because he gave her what you couldn't. The gift of missing him. While you were flooding her phone with good morning texts, he was letting her wonder if he was thinking about her. While you were rearranging your life around her schedule, he was making her fit into his. While you were asking, "How was your day?" every single day, he was living a life interesting enough that she wanted to ask about his. Do you see the pattern? Do you feel that shift in your chest? Phase 3 is the reckoning. This is where you realize that ignoring her isn't really about her at all. It's about breaking your own addiction to validation. Because let's be honest, you weren't texting her good morning because you cared about her morning. You were texting because you needed her to text back. You needed that little dopamine hit of acknowledgement. You were a validation junkie, and she was your dealer. The withdrawal is real. Your thumb will twitch toward your phone. You'll draft messages you'll never send. You'll wonder if she's noticed your absence or if she's relieved by it. Some nights, the silence will feel so loud you'll want to break it just to prove you still exist in her world. Don't. This is where the alchemy happens. In that silence, in that space you're creating, something transforms. You start filling the void with yourself instead of her. Your thoughts become clearer, without the constant static of, what does she think? Your goals become sharper, without the blur of what would she want? You start becoming who you actually are instead of who you think she wants you to be. And that's when reality hits. The version of you that was chasing her, that wasn't even you. It was a performance. A character you created based on what you thought would make her stay. But here's the cold truth. She didn't leave you. She left the version of yourself you reflected. She could smell the inauthenticity like cologne applied with a paint roller. Women have evolved over millions of years to detect genuineness versus performance. Their survival once depended on choosing mates who were actually capable, not just pretending to be. That radar is still active. When you're constantly available, constantly agreeable, constantly seeking approval, you're broadcasting insecurity at a frequency only she can hear. But when you withdraw, when you focus on yourself, when you become genuinely indifferent to her validation, you start broadcasting something else entirely: self-sufficiency. And self-sufficiency is attractive because it signals genetic fitness without saying a word. Here's a psychological truth that will reorganize your entire worldview. The person who needs the relationship less controls the relationship more. This isn't about power games. It's about emotional physics. Need creates pressure. Pressure creates resistance. Resistance kills attraction. When you need her to complete you, you're essentially telling her that you're incomplete. Why would anyone want to board a sinking ship? But when you ignore her, truly ignore, not pretend to ignore, while checking her stories from a fake account, you're demonstrating completeness. You're showing her that your happiness, your purpose, your direction in life exists independent of her participation. And that's the most attractive thing you can possibly communicate. Picture the last relationship you saw that actually worked. I mean, really worked, not Instagram worked. Notice something? Neither person is clinging. They're choosing each other from a place of want, not need. They have separate friends, separate interests, separate goals, that happen to align. They miss each other because they actually spend time apart, not because they're pretending to be busy. This is what ignoring her teaches you: how to create space for actual desire to grow. Because here's what happens in her mind when you're not constantly present: imagination. She starts wondering what you're doing, who you're with, what you're thinking about. Her brain, in the absence of constant data, starts creating scenarios, and the human imagination is always more powerful than reality. The version of you she constructs in your absence is more attractive than the needy version you were presenting in your presence. Think about it like this. You know how food tastes better when you're actually hungry? That's because deprivation enhances appreciation. When you're constantly feeding her attention, she's never hungry for it. She's stuffed, overwhelmed, nauseated by the abundance. But when you withdraw, when you create space, you're allowing her appetite to return. And appetite is the precursor to pursuit. But let me paint you the scene that most of you are actually living. It's 2 a.m. You're scrolling through her Instagram, analyzing the subtext of her stories. That guy who commented, "Is he competition?" That quote she posted, "Is it about you?" You're constructing elaborate narratives from digital breadcrumbs, driving yourself insane with speculation. Meanwhile, she posted that story 6 hours ago and hasn't thought about it since. This is the sickness. You're having a relationship with your idea of her while she's barely aware you exist. The cure isn't to ignore her. The cure is to become so engaged with your own life that ignoring her becomes a natural consequence, not a strategy. You don't check your phone because you're deadlifting. You don't text back immediately because you're in a flow state at work. You don't analyze her stories because you're too busy creating your own. Here's where the rubber meets the road. The moment this becomes manipulation instead of self-improvement is the moment it stops working. Women can smell agenda like sharks smell blood. If you're ignoring her as a tactic, she'll sense it. If you're ignoring her because you're genuinely focused on becoming better, she'll sense that too. And guess which one triggers pursuit? The brain has mirror neurons that unconsciously detect authenticity. When you're pretending to be busy, those neurons fire differently than when you're actually busy. It shows in your micro-expressions, your response patterns, your entire energy field. You can't fake genuine disinterest any more than you can fake genuine confidence. It has to be real, or it's worthless. So here's the progression that actually works. First, you recognize your addiction to validation. You see how you've been using her attention as a drug to medicate your own insecurity? This recognition hurts, it should. Pain is just information demanding action. Then you withdraw. Not dramatically, not announced, just a gradual redirection of energy. You stop initiating. You stop checking. You stop wondering. This feels like death at first, because in a way, it is. You're killing the version of yourself that needed her to feel complete. Next comes the rebuild. You fill the space her attention used to occupy with actual development, skills, fitness, knowledge, creation. You become interesting by doing interesting things, not by trying to appear interesting. Finally, and this is the part nobody talks about, you reach genuine indifference, not anger, not resentment, not pretended disinterest, actual peaceful indifference. You could take her or leave her. She could text or not text. You're good either way because your validation comes from your progress, not her approval. And that's when the magic happens. Because when you reach that state, that genuine self-sufficiency, you become what psychologists call a secure attacher. You're not anxious about losing her because you know you'll be fine without her. You're not avoidant because you're not afraid of connection. You're just solid, grounded, present. And that energy, that's what makes her chase. But here's the plot twist that'll rewire your brain. Once you reach that state, you might not want her anymore. Because the person who needed her validation was a weaker version of you. The person you've become might look at her and realize She was never that special. You just were that empty. The standards you couldn't maintain when you were desperate become non-negotiable when you're whole. The behavior you tolerated when you were needy becomes unacceptable when you're complete. The woman you thought was above your league reveals herself to be exactly at the level you were at, which is why you matched in the first place. This is the cosmic joke of attraction. The moment you become attractive enough to get her is often the moment you realize you don't want her. But let's get practical for a moment. You're probably wondering about the actual mechanics. How long do you ignore? What if she doesn't reach out? What if she moves on? Here's the answer that nobody wants to hear. If she moves on because you stopped giving her constant attention, she was already gone. You were just refusing to see it. Your attention wasn't keeping her interested. It was keeping you distracted from the truth that she'd already left emotionally. Real connection doesn't require constant maintenance. It's not a plant that dies without daily watering. It's more like a cactus that thrives in the spaces between attention. If your relationship can't survive you having a life outside of it, it's not a relationship. It's a dependency. And dependencies always end the same way: withdrawal, pain, and eventual recovery. The timeline varies, but the pattern doesn't. Days 1 through 3, she doesn't notice. Days 4 through 7, she notices but assumes you're busy. Week 2, she gets curious. Week 3, she reaches out. But here's the critical part. By week 3, if you've done this right, you genuinely don't care if she reaches out or not, because you've spent 3 weeks building something more valuable than her attention: yourself. Some of you are reading this and feeling resistance. But I actually care about her, you're thinking. I don't want to play games. Good, you shouldn't play games. This isn't about games. It's about game theory. It's about understanding the psychological dynamics that govern attraction and using them to become better, not to become manipulative. The difference is intention. Are you ignoring her to punish her? That's manipulation. Are you ignoring her to manipulate her emotions? That's toxic. Are you ignoring her because you're genuinely focused on becoming a better version of yourself? That's growth. And growth is attractive at a biological level that transcends all social conditioning. Here's what I need you to understand at a cellular level. Your attention is your most valuable currency. Where you spend it determines what grows in your life. When you're spending it all on someone who gives you minimal return on investment, you're not just wasting attention, you're wasting life force. You're bleeding energy into a void that gives nothing back. But when you redirect that attention inward, when you invest it in your own development, something profound happens. You start generating your own validation internally. You become your own source. And when you're your own source, you stop being a drain on others. You become a generator instead of a consumer. And generators attract, consumers repel. The neuroscience is clear on this. When you're constantly seeking validation, your brain is in a state of chronic stress. Cortisol floods your system. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for good decision-making, goes offline. You literally become dumber when you're needy. But when you're self-validated, when you're pursuing your own goals, your brain produces dopamine and serotonin naturally. You're literally high on your own supply. And that natural high, that's what confidence actually is. So let's address the elephant in the room. What if she never comes back? Then you've won the ultimate prize: freedom from someone who didn't value you. Because here's the truth that'll set you free. Anyone who doesn't pursue you when you create space wasn't interested in you. They were interested in what you provided. Attention, validation, entertainment, ego boost. The moment you stopped providing the service, they stopped pretending to care about the server. That's not loss, that's clarity. The right person doesn't need constant convincing. They don't require daily sales pitches about why they should choose you. They see your value because it's evident in how you live, not in how much attention you give them. When you have to chase someone to keep them interested, you're not in a relationship. You're in a sales job where the commission is paid in breadcrumbs of affection. But here's where it gets philosophically beautiful. The act of ignoring her isn't about getting her back. It's about getting yourself back. Every moment you don't check her Instagram is a moment you're choosing yourself. Every text you don't send is energy you're investing in your own growth. Every thought you don't waste on her is a thought you can spend on your purpose. And purpose is the ultimate attraction trigger. Women aren't attracted to men who make them their purpose. They're attracted to men who have a purpose beyond them. When your mission becomes bigger than your need for her validation, you transcend the needy energy that repels and embody the focused energy that attracts. You stop being a planet orbiting her sun and become your own solar system. And solar systems don't chase. They attract satellites naturally through gravitational pull. This is the final phase, the one most men never reach: transcendence. You're not ignoring her anymore because there's nothing to ignore. She's become peripheral to a life that's so full, so engaging, so purposeful, that her presence or absence doesn't fundamentally alter your trajectory. You've become what Stoics call preferred indifferent. You'd prefer her presence, but you're indifferent to her absence. And that state, that's not just attractive, that's powerful. That's free. That's the version of you that you've been searching for in her validation all along. The irony is perfect. You thought you needed her to complete you, but the journey of learning to ignore her teaches you that you were always complete. You just needed to remove the distraction to see it. So here's your homework, and it's simpler than you think. Stop. Just stop. Stop texting first. Stop checking her stories. Stop wondering what she's thinking. Stop trying to make her see your value. Stop performing for an audience that isn't watching. Stop watering dead plants. Stop feeding the addiction. Stop being available for someone who treats you as an option. Start living like your attention is worth something. Because it is. Start building something that matters more than her opinion. Because it does. Start becoming someone you'd want to date. Because that's the only person you're guaranteed to spend your life with. The moment you truly start ignoring her isn't the moment you stop caring. It's the moment you start caring about something more important: yourself. And that shift, that reorientation of priority, that's what triggers the chase. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you've become hard to get. There's a difference, and women can feel it in their bones. Here's the cold truth that most men die without learning. The relationship you have with yourself sets the template for every relationship you have with others. When you abandon yourself for someone else's attention, you're teaching them to abandon you too. When you ignore your own needs to meet theirs, you're showing them your needs don't matter. When you chase them at the expense of your own goals, you're demonstrating that you're not worth pursuing. But when you choose yourself, consistently and unapologetically, you're setting a standard. You're showing the world and her that your time, attention, and energy have value, that they must be earned, not expected, that you're not a resource to be consumed, but a person to be respected. And respect, not desperation, is what triggers genuine pursuit. The clock is ticking. Every second you spend reading her old texts is a second you could spend writing your future. Every moment you waste wondering if she misses you is a moment you could invest in becoming someone worth missing. Every ounce of energy you pour into getting her attention is energy stolen from building a life that naturally commands attention. The choice is yours, and you make it every moment. Chase or be chased. Need or be needed. Orbit or be the center. But remember this, and let it reorganize your entire approach to relationships. The person who's willing to walk away first always has the power. Not because walking away is powerful, but because the ability to walk away means you have somewhere else to go. And having somewhere else to go means you're not dependent on where you are. That's not ignoring her. That's ignoring the version of yourself that needed her to feel whole. And that's when everything changes. That's when the texts start coming. That's when she starts wondering. That's when she starts chasing. Not because you manipulated her, but because you became worth chasing. Not because you ignored her, but because you stopped ignoring yourself. The truth is, she was never the prize. The prize was always the person you become when you stop chasing someone else and start building yourself. The man who needs nothing from her gets everything from her. The man who gives her space to miss him creates a void only he can fill.